All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. Really excited you're all here. This is I think this is maybe our third or fourth in this Capsule Creative Table series. And really excited to have Jess Rosenberg joining us, who's going to be chatting about all things AirOps and AI. And so just to start, would love for you all to drop in the chat where you work, what you do, and where you work and what you do there. Your name will show up, obviously, on Zoom, so you don't have to include that. But the reason we host these events and really like to bring together creative leaders is for a few reasons. We've been hosting events for creative and marketing leaders for over 2 years now. It's a really important part of our company and our community. And for a few reasons, there's obviously a lot of changes happening with AI is impacting all of us in many ways. And I think when there's these really big changes happening, the best way to navigate them is to talk to your peers about it and hear from your peers who are also navigating all these changes. And so we like to gather people to discuss these topics. And just for a little bit of context, I'll give a quick intro. I'm Natalie Taylor. I lead marketing at Capsule, joined by our CEO and co-founder, Champ Bennett.
Hey, everybody.
And of course, we have Jess Rosenberg from AirOps. But the reason that we like to gather creative leaders in particular, I'll give a little just quick context around Capsule. Sorry, hold on. Having a slide issue. One moment. So Capsule is a AI-powered video editing tool system for enterprise brands. And it is built exclusively for enterprise brands and what they need. And we work closely with in-house creative leaders who are really trying to scale video in an on-brand way. We work with hundreds of creative leaders who are inundated with video requests from all across the organization and are trying to enable a self-service video system for their organization so that they can work on higher tier creative projects, the kind of projects that Jess is going to be sharing about, a rebrand within 6 weeks, so that the creative teams can focus on those projects instead of these kind of lower tier, more templatized video requests. And so it's a video system that is very collaborative, easy to use, and most importantly, keeps everyone on brand, which is what we all care about here in this room. And we work with a lot of the leading brands who are really trying to scale video in an on-brand way and enable self-service within their organizations. So if that's of interest to you, we love chatting with creative teams of all shapes and sizes about scaling video, and I'm happy to chat about that with you. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Champ, who's going to kick us off.
All right. Thank you, Natalie, and hello, everybody. Great to see some familiar faces on the screen here for another awesome Capsule event. Very, very excited about who we have today, Jess Rosenberg, who has quite the resume. I'm just going to read off a couple of the companies that she has led brand and creative for over her 20-year career. We're talking about Twitter, Cloudflare, Mural, Webflow, Jasper, and she is now at AirOps. And if you've been paying attention to LinkedIn at all, or Twitter, wherever you spend your time, social media these days, you may have noticed that AirOps recently announced a Series B along with a beautiful new rebrand led by Jess in record timing, which we are absolutely going to get into the weeds of today. Jess has deep experience across brand design, building brand systems. She's a great storyteller. She understands motion. She understands brand campaigns. But what excites me most today is that she is someone who spent a lot of time thinking and building frameworks out for her teams on how AI and creative can work together today and in the future too. So she has a very strong point of view. We're excited to chat with her. And I think she's a perfect guide for today's conversation on brand and AI. So Jess, thank you so much for spending the time with us.
Thanks so much for having me and for that fantastic intro. I appreciate it.
Why don't we just start? Because I know AirOps is not nearly as well known as some of the other companies in your background. Can you just maybe start by telling us a little bit about AirOps, maybe how you ended up there? I know you started just, I think, a couple of months ago, which is incredibly impressive given the rebrand.
Yeah, for sure. So AirOps helps brands ultimately get found in AI search. So for folks here who use ChatGPT on a regular basis, if you're like me, I may go into ChatGPT now and ask, what are the best restaurants in Austin I can take my daughter to for her birthday? And it'll give me, a list of results. And you can really ask ChatGPT anything for any product that you're looking for. And people are now shifting to ChatGPT to ask these types of questions versus Google, like traditional search. And so AirOps is essentially a platform that empowers brands to craft quality content that's on brand, authoritative in their voice, to effectively get seen and cited in AI search. And what led me there?
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
I was going to say, what led me there, it was a bit opportunistic. I was taking some time off. I had recently left Jasper, which is a company in a similar space. And I posted about my departure on LinkedIn, and AirOps' CEO, Alex, reached out to me. And he's like, I love the Jasper rebrand. Do you want to come do the same thing at AirOps? And I was, at that point, I was like really tired from a rebrand. But then the more I learned about AirOps, I was like, this is actually a very cool company. And for me, it's like product is important and the impact it's having on customers, but people, like who I'm working with, is sometimes even more important. And I just fell in love with the people there.
Yeah, that's awesome. And also, I mean, it's interesting, sort of, I think you have some of the same challenges that Capsule does around, like, how do you get scaled content while maintaining that brand voice and using AI while still having some control over that narrative at scale. So definitely excited to get into some more of that. One thing that I was just extraordinarily impressed by was how quickly you guys put together this rebrand. I saw a lot of it on social. It looked really gorgeous. And then I saw that, you had been there for 2 months, that you had done this in about 6 weeks, which I think is insane. And it speaks to, I think the new world that we're living in. So I think a lot of people probably here today are just very interested to hear, how much was AI involved in that? And then more broadly, just how do you think, or like, what are some of your frameworks around AI and how do you use those tools in your workflows? And I know you have a few slides on this too, so I don't know if we want to bring that up.
Yeah, I can definitely bring those up. Let me connect those here. By the way, for anyone who joined a little bit late, feel free to drop in the chat where you work, what you do there. Just we can, this is a Zoom meeting. Feel free to leave your camera on and drop in questions in the chat as we go along. There will be time for Q&A at the end, but feel free to drop them in as they come up. So maybe I can start here. I actually did this exercise with my team at Jasper last year, and we found ourselves in this extreme hype cycle of AI tools as they were coming out. There was Midjourney, Runway, Luma, all these things were popping up every day. There was a new tool. And so we really took the time to think about, like, what does this actually mean for us? And then how do we fit AI into a process that makes sense? So for me, after a ton of reflection over the past years, being an AI-empowered creative team allows us to think bigger. We're not just using AI to move faster, but we're using it to expand how we think. We use it to open up new creative possibilities, so basically pushing the boundaries of what we can concept, ideate, design, execute, while making sure that we're still keeping human storytelling, emotion, and strategy at the core of it. And a big unlock for my teams in the past few years has been AI helping to shift our energy away from tedious, repetitive, and production type tasks, which has really helped us focus on work that we love doing and that we're creatively and strategically strong at versus the minutia of like masking a image in Photoshop by hand and removing the background. So a lot of
a lot of gains from AI, but at the end of the day, it's still very much human led. And I don't see a world, at least not yet, and don't mark my words, that where AI will replace us anytime soon. I think you're on mute, Champ.
Thank you. On that note, that's actually one of the questions I wanted to get to, which we could just jump into briefly here. There are sort of two camps when we talk to creative teams at Capsule. Some people who are really embracing it in the way that you are, where, it's like, hey, we're just trying to do more with less, like get rid of some of the monotony and some of the creative work so we can focus on the storytelling. How have the creative teams that you've proposed this framework to, have they welcomed it? Because not everyone that we talk to is on board. Many people are still afraid of some of these tools. So curious how the reaction has been.
Honestly, like the creatives I've worked with, and even maybe it's a bit different since the past few companies I've been at have been AI first companies. And so adopting AI has been more embraced and like recommended. But from a creative team standpoint, the folks on my team have generally been really excited about it and really curious to lean in, experiment, learn different tools, see what sticks. And so much so that they're able to now know which tool makes the most sense for the work and the workflow that they're focused on. So I've only met very few people, and I speak to a lot of folks across marketing and creative pretty regularly, and I've met a couple of people that want nothing to do with AI. And unfortunately, I think there's a negative sentiment around AI and what it's doing for jobs and how it can be limiting to an extent, or some people think it can be.
Yeah. In the creative realm, to me, it's so interesting because there is so much monotony around the work that we do. And I think the best creatives are really just great storytellers. And it seems like you've got a good kind of guide for how to think about this here.
Yeah, these are some principles that my team at Jasper and I came up with as we were kind of thinking about how to infuse AI into our day-to-day workflows. And, we thought it made sense to think of AI as a co-creator, not a replacement for our craft or skills or, experience. It's meant to boost us or amplify us. I always use the Tony Stark Iron Man reference. It's like the Iron Man suit without Tony Stark in it is like basically useless.
That's great.
That's kind of how I think about creatives plus AI. There's so many efficiency gains that we can see by using AI, especially in production, but they should never overpower the craft. Like there always needs to be human in the loop checkpoints, crafts people checking the work, making sure that final means final. And then, the ethics and responsible use. I think the same principles apply to not using AI. It's like, don't copy people's work. Don't copy things that exist out in the world. Make sure that you're doing your due diligence to make sure that happens. And I think that needs to be happening even more so with AI, given these models are pulling from, what's been created before. And then also experimentation is so important. Like I always tell creatives to just lean in and just be curious and try all the things, even if the tools are crappy, try them. You never have to look at them again. It's like, find what works for you, but having a general sense of what's out there and what teams are using, I think is really important to stay on top of.
Yeah. And to me, some of the most impressive use cases are people who are doing things with AI that previously were not possible. So sort of the opposite of what most people are afraid of, which is like, oh, people could just use AI to copy things very easily. But I'm finding more and more that there's things that creative teams are doing. And it's like, wow, that just wasn't even possible before. And those are the things that excite me the most.
For sure.
Very cool. Talk about tooling a little bit. I know you've got some thoughts on a stack that has worked well for you. Would love to I think people are, to your point earlier, there's a lot of tool fatigue. You and I just even 20 minutes ago were talking about the new version of Nano Banana, which just came out about an hour ago, and it's kind of mind-boggling. Literally, you could spend all day just playing with new tools. So
Yeah.
How do you think about, adopting new tools versus, carving out time of your day or, resources to go and try these new things and then figure out what to bring back into the stack?
Yeah. I feel like last year I was really good at trying new tools constantly. And even into early this year, I think because this rebrand took 6 weeks, I've been very hyper focused on that. And so I'm like itching to explore Nano Banana and Gemini 3 and some of the new things that have come out. But generally, I think there's a lot of different ways creatives can stay on top of new tools that are coming out. I have some resources later on in the talk that I'm happy to recommend. But the tool stack here, these are all tools that I've used pretty consistently in one way, shape, or form over the past couple of years. Figma is not on here, which I'm now realizing I should have put on here. Because throughout this entire AirOps rebrand, we were living in Figma and actually using their new AI tools within their platform without ever having to leave, which was actually very helpful. So I'm excited to see they're rolling out more of that.
There is one other logo that I noticed is not on here that's really important.
Obviously the Capsule logo. We'll talk about that after.
We'll get there.
Yeah. But 11 Labs has been incredible for voiceover. I think Suno for music creation. Really fun and like easy to spend an entire day just in Suno making music. And then Flora has been really interesting to experiment with. And I'll show you some actual workflows that we experimented in Flora in a bit. But it's basically like a visual canvas that allows you to train a visual model around a specific aesthetic. And then you can apply that model to generate images at scale. And you can leverage different models like, Nano Banana, ChatGPT, Kriya, as well as video models too. So really powerful platform. And then some of these other ones like Cursor is like, if you code at all, if you're a designer that codes, Cursor is really cool. I spent probably a day earlier this year. I was like, okay, this is going to be really hard to learn, but I'm going to do it. And I spent an entire day and I got a Figma plugin up and running by building it in Cursor.
That's amazing.
And it was pretty buggy and it did not look good, but I was like, cool. Okay. I figured out how to set something up and then it moved on to the next tool.
How do you think about like the role of the creative going forward? There seems to be this blending of, as a result of AI, kind of this blending of, or collapsing of the stack when it comes to like design versus code versus, brand. It seems like everyone is sort of feeling a little bit empowered to go a little bit more horizontal. Are you seeing that in your teams?
I am seeing that for sure. We have our lead product designer uses Figma Make daily for prototyping. And it's such a great way to get, product prototypes out and shared with the team and even customers. And for other use cases, it's interesting because someone will be like, oh, I spun up this landing page in like V0 or Cursor. Like, doesn't it look great? And it's like, that's awesome, but it does not look great. And so I'm saying this because I do think that the specialists today are still very much needed. Like, I'm able to spin up an app or a landing page, but if someone inspected my code who's actually been doing this for years, they'd probably be like, you actually missed this, this, and this, and you should probably do all these other things.
It seems like today it's actually more of like a way to facilitate communication, like how to get ideas out of your head and into something tangible as a way to just talk about something and present ideas. Yeah. We'll see where it goes from here.
Yeah.
But that does seem to be the primary use case today.
Real quick, I'd love for everyone else on the call to jump in and add some of their, like, what's in your tool stack? What are you using on a pretty regular basis, or what are you wanting to try or use on a regular basis? From other events we host, like, this is one of the most discussed topics, and everyone wants to know what their peers are using and loving. So please drop in the chat, and then maybe we can come back to that during the Q&A session, or just come back to it later.
Jess, I'm curious, like with all the tools that you've tried, like where have you figured out where AI is not useful? I mean, you touched on a little bit just then where it's like you still need that specialization, but just curious if you have any thoughts there.
For sure. So I think there's moments where like craft is the final product, like a rebrand, a homepage redesign, like a brand campaign, a design system, etc. And those need like taste, nuance, intention, especially if you're trying to create something that's truly like craft oriented, differentiated, and unique and has a high bar. I think too, it's like when you're needing actual insights and not output per se. So like what I mean by that, at AirOps, we actually call this frontier knowledge. So like the insights you gain from lived experiences, customer conversations, cultural awareness, companies' financial data, for example, unique, proprietary information that AI could never give you. And then judgment calls. So like trade-offs, prioritizations, like knowing when something's actually finished. AI can maybe support you there and like help guide you, but it can't decide for you. I think only humans and humans that have that experience in their craft can make those decisions. Because those are leadership skills. They're not pattern matching tasks,
And there's so much context that goes into that just
totally,
no matter how much you prompt is not going to be there, right? So
exactly. Yeah. And then also like if there's a risk of something being wrong, and if that's too high, like later on in my AI Slop slide, I'll show some examples. But if you're sharing something publicly on behalf of a brand and you're using AI and maybe AI gets a detail wrong, like that is a big trust offense that you're making with your customers, with your prospects. So it's really important to keep that in mind when you're using human judgment mixed with AI outputs.
And I think the risk obviously increases the bigger the company, the more legal and compliance and governance is in place. And it's interesting. I mean, that's how Capsule has really differentiated itself in selling directly to enterprise where those risks are really high. And it's right now there's such a big difference between how consumers are adopting AI creative tools versus enterprise, where there is still critically important for like human to be in the loop at the end and make these judgment calls.
For sure. Yeah, we see similar things at AirOps too. A lot of our customers are in regulated spaces. So like Ramp, Chime, Carta, for example. And the product gives you built-in checkpoints just to make sure that you're on brand, that you're using proprietary knowledge, and the human in the loop checkpoints at multiple stages, since that's the most important thing.
Yeah. This is awesome. Love it. I want to talk about this rebrand. I know we don't have a ton of time. So you did this rebrand in 6 weeks after you had been there for just a couple of weeks, it sounds like. That's previously what most people would think was insane. So very curious to hear like how you pulled this off. Gonna steal some ideas for Capsule's next rebrand as well. But just tell us how this has happened.
I love myself a good challenge. What can I say? But I think I've done this enough times. I think it's like if you're training for years for a marathon and then you finally get like that marathon moment, you're like, all right, this is how it's going to go. So for this, I knew exactly who I wanted to bring on from the get-go. It was one of the most like talented brand designers I have ever worked with. He was on my team at Webflow, and he was doing some contract work, and I knew that he would actually knock this out of the park. And so brought him on. I brought on a talented copywriter. I have one really talented brand designer on my team. And then it was me. And then I think what also helped is that the stakeholder group was very small. It was our CEO. We kicked off the project at a leadership team offsite on my first week at the company. And so that week, we actually got very quick buy-in on the concept. And from there, we were able to sprint the rest of the time on executing it. And then overall too, like one of the reasons that drew me to AirOps was that the founders just have this really bold appetite to stand out and tell a story that's rooted in craft and truly be different in the space.
Yeah.
And so knowing this, I think helped get us to quick early approval on the idea.
What would you say to like big companies who spend 2 years working on rebrands, maybe 5 years working on rebrands? Like, is the difference just, I mean, obviously there's a lot more, stakeholders involved, but then there's also people who say that you need to spend all this time in strategy and, it sounds like a lot of this is just sort of gut, what do we think our mission is? Let's make fast decisions and move forward. But just curious how you would, because you've had that experience too, right? You've seen kind of both sides of it. How would you compare the two?
I think strategy can be done relatively quickly, honestly. And we did work on strategy relatively quickly at AirOps too. I think we were lucky in the sense that the founders knew exactly what the core belief was and what the positioning and the mission of the company would always be. And so that really helped speed things along.
Yeah.
And we really used that to help fuel this concept for the rest of the work, which was like celebrating the craft of great content. Because our core belief at AirOps is that craft and quality is the only durable strategy in the AI era. And we really wanted the system to reflect that through and through. But for big companies, I think big companies might be used to doing things a certain way. It's like rebrands used to take a year plus. They used to cost over $1 million. You used to hire a pentagram to do it. Yeah. And the world has changed and things are different now. And especially for smaller companies that need to move fast, it's like the more time that goes by, the less of a potential impact you can have in the market with a new brand. So there's a real urgency, in my opinion, to get it out quickly.
It seems like brand is more important than ever. Even for startups, I think you positioned that well as like, in part due to the ease of content creation today. The only way to really stand out is to make beautiful, on-brand content. And where was I going with that?
Were you distracted by the sea of same?
I was.
I mean, like these days, it's honestly like, maybe I'll say this with a grain of salt, but like AI branding is almost like brands have an easy open door to stand out.
Yeah.
And these AI companies and startups that are spinning up and being super successful, I think their success happened so quickly that they didn't necessarily have time to really think through brand quite yet.
Yeah.
Which is fine, but I anticipate that next year might be maybe more of the year for AI branding, is like the dust is starting to settle a little bit and these companies are starting to realize like, I really need to differentiate since you can't always compete on features.
That's exactly what I was going to say. So thank you for bringing me back. It seems to me like brand is becoming a big differentiator as it relates to AI, when building is becoming kind of, easier and faster.
Yeah.
Brand piece and how people are positioning themselves. This is a great example, Claude versus OpenAI versus Gemini. How are you deciding when these tools are essentially like, it's becoming kind of Coke versus Pepsi, right?
Totally. Yeah, I mean, Claude is taking the human approach, which not many AI brands are, surprisingly or not.
Yeah.
But I love that they are. And I don't know if you guys saw the viral coffee store pop-up that they did in New York last month. It was all over my feed. It was like all I was seeing. But a friend of mine went and she said she went inside. There was no computers. It was just people connecting as humans over coffee and talking about what music they liked. And people were in line for the hat that said thinking on it, which is wild.
It is wild.
And
it also makes me wonder if we're yearning for those things even more than ever.
I think so.
There's a part of that feels like just perfectly timely. When we spent the last decade becoming addicted to our phones, now we're becoming somewhat addicted to talking to intelligence. And I think it's a really bold move to say, let's get people together and not talk about it or look at computers at all.
Completely agree. It's cool.
Very cool.
But yeah, I mean, the rebrand, again, happened over 6 weeks. I can talk a little bit more around, this is what we pitched at that leadership team offsite. It was greenlit 5 days after working on the concept and mood boarding this a bit. And the concept is rooted in honoring the craft of great quality content. And it nods to the great content of the past while also embracing the new intelligent systems shaping the future. So we wanted to bring to life a world that's basically leading marketers through a renaissance of sorts. And the Renaissance theme stuck, I think, and we ran with it. So these were some early explorations, editorial nod to like the printing press and print of the past. Our Figma files are insane. I was actually thinking of opening them up publicly because I've seen other teams do that, and I always think that's really cool. But
that looks great.
we started with we bought a bunch of books. Like I literally went to Barnes and Nobles, which I haven't been in that store since I was like in high school. And I was like, what books do you have on the printing press? And I bought some and I scanned some in, and so did my team. And we started contrasting like old print, like Gutenberg Bible type of, artifacts with modern digital motifs. So the homage to content of the past was a big thing. And especially we saw parallels with the printing press and that industrial revolution and what that democratized for communication and content back then. And the same thing is happening now with AI. But we couldn't be all rooted in the past because AirOps is a AI powered platform that's looking forward. And so we kind of combined the worlds to mix art and science, craft and performance, human and machine. And we wanted to nod to the belief that tech is powerful, but human intention is ultimately what gives it meaning. So some examples of, editorial styled portraits of our customers, the combination of serif and sans serif, kind of like mixing that modern and historic feel, digital kind of pattern motifs.
These are great.
And then, of course, like this had to be a world that was super flexible. So when we feature a product and platform, it, looks modern and fresh and it fits within the universe that we've created.
What were the key assets for the relaunch? I know you did a website, there was a launch video. What kind of were the key deliverables at the end?
It was a new homepage, we did a hero video. We did a series of customer CMO stories that are launching throughout this week. Flipped all of our marketing templates, social. We did a big push on social with influencers. So yeah, it was all.
You've been busy.
What's that?
I said you've been busy.
Yeah, it was a lot, but it was really fun. And like the shocker, I think that I'll reveal now is that AI played maybe like a 1% role in the entire thing. We used it at the end. We had this idea. We're like, let's create these editorial portraits for all employees on the team. What normally would have taken painstakingly long, we leaned into Flora and Figma to generate these portraits. So first we tried training a model in Flora, which actually worked pretty well. But when we went to scale it across 50 plus people, it was really wonky and each output looked different. So we took the same prompt that we used in Flora, we'll go back to these, and then went into Figma and actually leveraged Figma's built-in edit image AI feature, which is based on Nano Banana. Had a really great prompt that we had tinkered with here and there that we made in Flora with ChatGPT. And then we single-handedly converted each image, which still a manual process, but still faster than what it would have taken us.
AirOps champ. There he is.
Look at me. Wow.
Looks good.
I feel like I'm on the team already. That's great.
There you go.
Very cool. Like this idea of scale is so interesting to me in the context of AI. You have done this rebrand. You've worked at a couple of like smaller startups where you've done these like really rapid rebrands. When you get to, creative teams of 20, 30 people, and then marketing and sales in the thousands. How do you think about the systems that will enable other people outside of the creative organization to make assets on their own?
I think it's very similar to how we have been approaching it historically. Templates, making sure templates that we make for teams are on brand, robust. We're experimenting with something now internally at AirOps where we're testing this with both our own platform, but also building a Claude repository where we have our new voice and tone guidelines, all of our product feature information in Claude, and scaling that across the company for our sales teams and anyone else who needs to write to basically like access what's on brand. AirOps can do this too. But we wanted to make something that was a bit more scalable across the company for non-content engineering folks. So I think it's similar. It's just making sure the mechanisms and inputs up front are allowing for strong outputs on the other ends, whether those be branded templates or baked in brand voice and tone. And then,
I've heard of like other creative folks calling it almost like the creative team is almost becoming the context, right? Like you guys are doing the foundational work, feeding that into these models, whether it's text or images or videos. And then that gives an incredible asset to the organization who can then go and create by proxy, right? And it feels like for the first time, we might actually be entering an era where like truly scalable creative to non-creatives is actually possible in a way that creative teams feel like they're part of instead of completely outside of.
I think so, for sure. I think it still warrants the topic though of which assets do become, self-serve and which ones still get,
and where can they go and
craft love and unique touch of the creative team. But I think the more that you can self-serve, the more time the creative team will have for those high touch, unique pieces that only that they can work on.
Yeah. Love it.
These are just some examples there were a lot of last minute things that we wanted to do as part of the rebrand and the Series B launch. And so a few areas where AI really helped at the 11th hour. I was like, I need fake AirOps themed ingredients to put on the back of this popcorn label. I need a visual for this Spotify playlist that we're linking from the popcorn that customers can scan. So like little things like that. And then dreaming up new swag, which Flora is just so good at, in my opinion. But as easy as bringing in a design, flipping on Nano Banana, and then a simple prompt can get you an output that's this nice looking.
Absolutely beautiful. So cool. I know when we chatted last time, and we're going to open it up for audience questions in a second here, but I did want to end on a fun note, which is the last time we chatted, you were talking about how AI Slop can have a place in branding today, which surprised me a little bit for someone who like yourself who cares so much about craft. So I just want to hear how you're thinking about that. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I think when it's intentional, when it's meant to be sarcastic or funny, I think there's more forgiveness, when it's a mistake, like this J. Crew ad, which someone really zoomed into the details here, as they should be doing, especially if they're creative. When it's a mistake, that's when it's bad. But, I think there's probably also a spectrum as to how you can define what slop is. There's like slapstick comedy. There's videos created in Sora. But I think there could be a time and place for it, just like how memes have their place in the world.
I love that. And it gets back to what I was saying earlier, which is that like, I think AI will enable new content types and formats that didn't exist before. And maybe the most interesting use of just pure AI is to do things that weren't possible before. And this is one of them, right? So now AI Slop has also kind of become a communication format that previously didn't exist. I think like GIFs and memes sort of feels like the natural progression of those.
Yeah, for sure. I saw someone in the chat say, I feel like it's going to influence the insanity of the Super Bowl ads this year. It probably will. The
I
interesting
think so.
thing with some commercials that I've seen made with AI, some of them you can't tell because they actually are pretty good. And so that warrants a different conversation is soon, should we care if it's made with AI or not? Is it just the output and the quality we should care about regardless of how it was made? I
Yeah.
think there's still a lot of conversation around people being like, oh my God, that Coke spot was made with AI. And there's so much focus on the how and not as much on the quality.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, I just think that's interesting.
It's awesome. Well, in the spirit of opening up the conversation, we'd love for folks in the audience to have a chance to ask Jess some questions. Jess, this was incredible. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. So Nat, I'll hand it over to you if you want to MC some questions if we have any.
Yeah. I don't think we've gotten any explicit questions in the chat yet, but feel free to either raise your hand or hop off mute if you want to ask any questions directly around anything we've chatted about or any questions for Jess. I can kick us off with one question. You know, we talked a lot about experimenting with AI tools. How do you encourage a culture of experimentation with your team within the different teams that you've worked on? And how do you either encourage the experimentation or like build some structure around testing or, doing I know some teams do like AI summits where they all kind of test different tools, and just curious what your thoughts are for implementing and experimenting across the team.
Yeah, for sure. With my team at Jasper last year, we had like an AI power hour every 2 weeks where we just all met as a team and tinkered and tried new tools together. We also did something fun in Slack, like an async thing that was triggered by a Slack bot. It was called the Mid-Journey Minute. And it would give you a random prompt that the entire team could then go and like make a Mid-Journey image or whatever tool you wanted to use to visualize the prompt and then share that in Slack. So those are a few lightweight things that honestly like worked really well because it got us experimenting together, got us playing, and so much so that like it actually got us to be using some of these tools for real projects too. So I think there's a lot of low impact, low effort, high impact things that teams can be doing to make sure that you're supporting your teams and experimentation with these tools.
Anyone want to come off mute and ask a question? Or share, some of there was some chat around AI tool usage and what you're using on a daily basis, or wanting to experiment with. Would love to hear from others as well if there's tools that you want to evangelize or maybe caution against.
That's a good question. Caution against. I have to think on
We
that.
have one question here that's great, actually. Has AirOps used trained AI for crafting any brand assets or creative assets? You touched on that a little bit with Flora. But yeah, curious how you think about, particularly for visual assets. Have you done any training of any models?
Not yet. We tried a little bit in Flora, but we haven't gotten there yet. I'd like to experiment there and see what works.
Yeah.
I have a quick question.
For you. Oh, go ahead, Seth.
Just let me mute my speaker here.
There you go, Seth. You're live.
Okay. So my question is, one of the things I like about Capsule so much is everything is all in one platform. And when I use another image gen tool and it's like such a chunky UI and it's kind of like difficult to use. So when I've been doing AI things, I do it within Capsule. I was just curious how you bring in other assets if you use another image gen tool.
Is that a Capsule specific question?
Well, just more about like, I tend to just use the things within Capsule, but like if you're using the other image gen tools, they don't really have a good UI and just seems like you have to render it. And then do you bring it in as like H.264 file or how you do it?
I actually love this question. And it was one I wanted to ask you, Jess, too, maybe just a slightly different angle on it, which is you showed up a slide like that was like a grid of tools that you're using. And yet all of these tools are owned by different companies who have different incentives for how they work with each other. It does seem like we're kind of totally unbundling the creative suite again. And yeah, just curious to Seth's question, how you think about, first of all, like, how are you doing that today? Does everyone just need to know that, like, if you want to put a video or an audio file from 11 Labs into Premiere, you've got to export it and import it. And you need that creative understanding. Is that just people on your team know that, right? But not everyone understands that, right? So it does kind of limit the number of people who can use these more professional grade tools.
Totally. It's a really great point. I think there's some tools, to your point, like Capsule, it sounds like is doing this, is starting to bundle models into one platform. Midjourney is probably one of the only like really strong image platforms that has not done any bundling that I've seen. And so, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think it takes people knowing how to master that workflow in order to be successful there. And honestly, I think more people should be talking about it because it's not intuitive each time.
Yeah.
But with Flora, for example, I can drag in a PNG of an image that I have or an asset that I've created, and I can apply Runway's video model to it and experiment and see how it brings it to life with motion or apply a new style to it. So I definitely still manually bring in individual assets from elsewhere into these AI platforms to experiment.
Yeah, it does seem like a function of the state of the industry right now, which is that everybody's kind of specialized in their own particular asset type or workflow. And over time, I suspect we'll see these tools collapse into one place, whether it's Adobe or Figma or some new company that's pretty good at bringing collaborative tools together. It'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. Great question.
Christopher, I think you were going to jump in with a question too.
Thanks, Natalie. Hey, Jessica, thanks so much for sharing and congrats on the rebrand. Talk to us a little bit about like what's next for you and the team at AirOps. You have the new branding. It looks great. What does scaling start to look like as you start to look to build new content to really bring this to the next level? And what tools might you be using for that? And if anything, where do you still see gaps? Like what's the tool that you wish you had?
Those are great questions.
Awesome questions.
Yeah. So I think to answer your question on what's next with the brand, we still have a lot of systems thinking and designing to do. I think what we launched this week is really just like scratching the surface of this new brand, but I'd love to continue building out how it can flex across different surface areas like blog and video and how it applies to sound and motion and even illustration. That's an area that we didn't really get into in this sprint. So a lot to still think about and explore and define with this new brand world, which we will absolutely be doing in the coming months. And then the tools, it's like we live in Figma. We'll use Illustrator randomly for print things still because Figma doesn't do CMYK yet, although I'm sure it's probably coming soon. But in terms of AI tools, I'd love to dig into figuring out systems that work for us, whether it's in Flora or Korea, and experimenting with training some models around image styles, especially with portraiture and photography. So I think there's a lot more experimentation for us ahead. And also, since I'm still pretty new here, figuring out, especially as I scale my team, like what is the best process for us and how we apply AI. Where does it make the most sense, and defining that together as a group.
Sounds like we need to do a round 2 of this when you figure out the scale up part, because I do think that is the question on everyone's mind today is, where can we go from here? I'm really curious because you mentioned the team. As you're thinking about scaling your team, what are the attributes of people that you're looking for as it relates to, AI and experimentation? Is that something you're testing for in interviews now? Like, how do you think about that?
Honestly, it's more of testing around or gauging curiosity levels. So I don't necessarily need to hire someone that's super proficient in AI and like using it day to day in a crazy way, but I always generally love hiring creatives that are curious, eager to learn, high growth potential, and just have like a bias to action when it comes to like wanting to dive in, explore, learn new things. And so that's what I'm really measuring for is, are they excited to explore new tools with the team and, experiment and dive in headfirst on their own and with the team.
Yeah, those are great attributes. Are there any low-hanging fruit design projects that can be done successful with AI end to end? Anna, feel free to jump off mute too if you want to chat, but it's a good question.
I think that's like a big question as a design ops person. Like, how can we take more work off of the brand team's plate and have other folks in the company have access to create just, simple things like even decks. We have like a deck template. Like, I would love to be able to make those in a simpler way. So didn't know if anyone has had experience working on any design project, even as simple as like a very small, like paid ad or something, with AI end to end, or is that something that we feel like has yet to come?
That's a great question. I haven't used Gamma a ton. I've heard great things.
We use it all the time, every day. It's an amazing product.
Solid presentation tool that's AI powered. When I was at Jasper for a while, we were using Midjourney for blog images because my team was so small at the time. And we had a specific like general style and like art direction approach that we liked early on before we rebranded. And so a designer would still be creating the images, but they would do that end to end, 5 minutes, ship it to the content team. Aside from that, I mean, I'd love to hear what other folks. I haven't personally used anything for ads yet, although I've come across some new companies recently that seem like they're promising that can be possible, but I haven't personally tested it.
I got to do the obligatory sell on Capsule because this is literally our thesis, right? It's like, how do you take a system and then use AI? Not necessarily generative AI, although that is a component of Capsule. More so what we've done is like, how do you use AI to kind of make the creative tooling interfaces easier for other people and more accessible for other people, which is a little bit different than just, typing in a prompt and getting something out. But at the same time, that it really does make those formats more accessible to other people. So I think Gamma is a fantastic tool for trying to scale decks. You can build in some of your own branding, your fonts, your colors, your logos. You can make templates. Capsule is very similar. You can bring in your After Effects files from After Effects into Capsule, and you can make templates from them, which make them very, very easy to use. Simply like almost as easy as just filling out a form, where you can sort of place different assets into a template and do motion or video with them. I do think these tools are going to be really important for this idea of scaling on brand content in the future.
Thank you.
I've seen like cool features from Canva too recently.
Yeah.
AI capabilities in terms of infinite on-brand ad creation.
Yeah.
Which looks really promising.
Awesome.